Hi YouTube, welcome to a new video on my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the time when I went through an operation as a child, and I'm going to divide this video into 3 different sections, where the first one is going to be about the pre-operative period, which means the period before the surgery. The second section is going to be about the operation itself, and then the third one is going to be about the post-operative period, which means the period after the surgery. Just keep in mind that this operation was not to try to cure my cerebral palsy, because that wouldn't work anyway. It was just to try to make things better. Just to have that clarified. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So my parents would always try to find options to make it easier for me to move around and walk in my everyday life. And one of the options they found was that they could try Botox treatment on me. For those of you who don't know, Botox treatment basically just involves them taking a bunch of needles with Botox in them and just injecting them into my legs to hopefully make them less stiff. This didn't work well though, so we stopped after a few tries. But the thing is, the year of this operation, which was 3 years later, I got to know by a doctor that we got to know by a doctor that my hips were about to get dislocated because of my walking. So we had 2 options. We could either try the Botox treatment again and see if it worked better this time, or there was the operation. The thing that was risky was that this is no small procedure, it's a pretty big procedure, and the age line of the operation was actually 12 and I was only 6, so that was also a risk in itself. But I think my parents felt like they didn't have much of a choice, because obviously they didn't want me to have a dislocated hip, and the Botox treatment hadn't worked, so what else could they do, you know? So it was decided that I was going to do the operation. When I was admitted to the hospital, I was told that I would stay there for approximately 7 days. And I don't remember being especially scared. I just remember not liking the food there. But I guess that's pretty standard when it comes to hospital food. So I was assigned a room and I got a roommate. And this girl was going to do an operation that was even more complicated than mine, and she was one of the loudest snorers I've heard in my entire life, which made it pretty difficult for me to get a lot of good sleep during my days in the hospital. But yeah. And then another thing that the hospital staff told me was that I had to quit eating and quit drinking for 24 hours before the surgery. So I don't really remember how that was anymore, but I'll get to a little fun fact later about that. The day of the operation basically started with me repeatedly asking my mom how long until the operation, and she would keep saying the time. And I was just thinking about running away from the hospital and running home, to be honest, but obviously I couldn't. So eventually a nurse came into the room and asked me to change and all that stuff, and that's when I started crying non-stop. I just couldn't stop crying, but somehow I managed to change despite that, and I was taken into the operation room. I was actually allowed to listen to music until I fell asleep, which was kind of nice. I even actually remember which song I was listening to before falling asleep. And according to my mom, she was actually the one who injected the sleep medication into my system. And now to just have a quick look at what they actually did during the operation itself when I was asleep. The operation I took was called the multi-level operation, and it involves them expanding some tendons and cutting others. They were expanding my Achilles tendon, because when I was a child I walked in a very typical spastic diplegia way. And what I mean by that is that I wasn't able to put my entire foot on the floor. I was walking on my toes. So to hopefully try and change that, they were going to do this operation where they expanded my Achilles tendon, and then they cut some scenes some tendons, sorry, in my on my thighs and my lower legs and my hips. So they were cutting and expanding. And now back to the fun fact I mentioned earlier, because you remember how I said I had to quit drinking and eating sometime before the operation? And I literally dreamt of food during the operation. I don't understand how I can still remember what I dreamt on that particular day, but I remember dreaming of food, and not just any food. I dreamt of a turkey. You know those turkeys you see in cartoons and stuff that look really delicious? I dreamt of one of those. And there's also another detail that I can remember pretty vividly, and that is, I don't know if this happened right after I had waken up or right before I was taken into the operation room, and that is, I opened my eyes and saw this typical hospital sign with numbers and stuff that was blinking. I have no idea how I remember this, I just do. And then to when I woke up, I've been told by my parents afterwards that when I woke up, I screamed in pain for quite a long time, I think. And they said I screamed something like, "Take my legs out," because my legs were in plaster. So obviously they weren't really free, and I couldn't use them. And I don't really, it's a bit creepy because I don't remember screaming in pain. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember saying anything. I actually don't remember anything from waking up. So I guess that's a memory I have repressed, and I'm kind of happy about that because I don't really want to feel that pain. But yeah. So that was basically the day of the operation. First of all, damn, the recovery was a long process. The first thing I can remember from the recovery itself are the initial side effects that I got from the operation itself. The first one was that I threw up a whole lot. And if there's anything I really strongly dislike, it is throwing up. It's one of the worst feelings. My legs were also obviously having bandages all over. When I said plaster earlier, I didn't mean that. I obviously meant bandages. But yeah, that obviously made it much more difficult to get around. I think I was at the hospital for 10 days, and I think I had to lay in my hospital bed for 4 days at least before I could go home. But yeah, I also had some problems with my digestion system after the operation while at the hospital, so it was very difficult to go to the toilet and stuff. And I remember when getting home from the hospital, I was very sad that I couldn't play on the floor. I had to play on the table, and I was like, it's so little space on the table. Because obviously the bandages made it so that I couldn't really sit on the floor a lot. I had to use the wheelchair, and my legs also had to be completely straightened in order for the Achilles to be completely straight and not risking it to become short again. So I actually had to sit in a wheelchair with a tree plank under me. My dad actually carved a tree plank out of something because he wanted it to be very very convenient for me to just have my legs straight, and it actually worked really well. Here's a picture, by the way. So yeah, but the hardest part of the recovery was the fact that I basically had to learn how to walk all over. I had to learn how to walk straight because I had a tendency to walk a little bit to the side, and I remember working a lot with staircases because I also had a tendency to walk sideways, or not sideways, but I had a tendency to kind of swoop my leg up the steps kind of sideways, and I had to practice walking straight up the steps of a staircase. So staircases, that may be one of the reasons why staircases are on my list of objects I hate the most in life. And also, when I went back to school, I had to call my dad every time I needed to go to the toilet because the teachers weren't bothered to lift me, and the bandages made it impossible for me to do it myself, so I had to call my dad. I am very thankful I was as young as I was, because I didn't really... I think if I would have been 12, that would have been a lot more awkward. So yeah. The recovery process in total took at least a year. I wouldn't say 2 years, because it took really, really long. But the thing is, the operation in itself was a success. The operation made my legs so much less stiff. I remember when getting home, I could actually sit with my legs straight out for the first time in my entire life, and that was a really weird feeling. It just felt like my legs were a lot softer than they than they used to be. That sounds really weird, but it felt like that. And I didn't even have to remove the stitches from my scars, because they just fell out on their own. So it was kind of like a luxury not having to do that. But of course, the whole recovery process was the hardest thing, and it took a lot of time. So everyday life stuff became even more difficult. I remember, for example, when washing my hair, I had to literally lean over the bathtub with only my head, which was quite painful. But yeah, the operation was a success, and there is a tremendous amount of difference from how I walked before the operation and how I walk now. I wish I had the video clip that shows the difference, because you wouldn't believe it. It's tremendous. So now I can walk 10 times better than I ever did as a child. So the operation was very successful. It was actually so successful that they lowered the age line from 12 to, I think it was 6, or maybe even younger. So I'm very happy that I was sort of a part of opening up and giving others this opportunity, because it was really a major turning point for me physically. So yeah, and the very, very last thing I want to speak about in this video are my scars. My scars are something I've always been debating about with myself, because I've actually asked myself several times, do I dislike my scars? Do I feel uncomfortable about them? And the short and simple answer is no. I don't feel uncomfortable about my scars at all. Actually, I would say the complete opposite. I actually like my scars, not because they look good, because they don't, but I like them because they give me a reminder of what I went through, and that eventually it was a great thing. It made me so much more mobile and able to walk so much easier than I ever did as a child. And that has affected my whole life. I mean, if I wouldn't have had that operation, I don't know if I would even walk today. I don't know if I would be much more dependent on my wheelchair or not. So I'm very happy I got it, and I'm very happy about my scars actually. It feels weird to say that, but it's actually true. And here's the picture if you want to see one. And when the recovery period had lasted for a while, I was called in to do something called a motorical analysis thing, where I had to have these electrodes on my legs, like these. They were really painful to get off, by the way. And they basically measured how I walked. And that lasted for, I think it was 12 years or something after the operation, because I remember I was about 16, 17 or 18 when I stopped doing those. So yeah, that was another thing I had to do, but that was very nice, because they always followed up on me. They always checked that everything was okay, and even though my walking function has become slightly worse over the years, I feel like this operation was such a turning point physically that I feel like I'll never come back to that stage I was at as a child, where I basically just dragged my feet after me. And I'm very thankful for that. Thank you so much for watching this video, and don't hesitate to give me any kind of feedback. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to. Alright, bye!